We can't hear you, sir.
Sorry about that. For everybody, we are with Meet the Candidates for Broward County Sheriff. It is my pleasure to bring to you, whoop. We lost Mr. Clark. Hold on one second. It is my pleasure to bring the candidates for Sheriff, Sheriff Gregory Toney and Mr. Wayne Clark. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. What we're going to do is we're going to open up with a 1 minute why people should elect you as sheriff, and then we'll go into questions, and then after that we'll give you another 2 to 3 minutes for a closing. So we'll start off with Sheriff Toney, if you can give your first remarks.
Sure. Good evening. Thanks for having me on today, Robert. Thank you all to the viewers who are listening. You know, roughly 20 months ago, I was honored to step forth and take on this tremendous responsibility and serve as the 17th sheriff of Broward County and the first African-American to seat in this position. Since being in office, we have taken a proactive step towards readjusting, reallocating monies to make sure we enhance our school safety like we've never done before, advance our training protocols, give the men and women the necessary raises and things that they need to be successful. And as of recently, we have really taken on a much more community-oriented responsibility when it comes to building the gap, building trust during this time where the entire country is calling for social justice. I'll expand on a multitude of different projects that we've done in terms of the real-time crime center, building a state-of-the-art facility, and many more as we have a discussion today. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Robert. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Sorry for like the informal setting I'm in. I'm actually in Cooper City. Youth football has started back, and a part of my giving back to the community, I'm always into coaching and being a baseball commissioner. So thank you for having us first, and sorry for the informal setting of me being in my car. This election is important. This election is huge for Broward County. If you want to support the defund the police movement, then vote for Gregory Toney. If you want to support the riots in Portland and New York City, vote for Gregory Toney. If you want to bring real, true change to Broward County, I'm your candidate. I am the candidate has from day one talked about this position being nonpartisan. I'm the candidate from day one that has had a platform that has now been adopted for the most part by Gregory Toney in the last few weeks. So I look forward to discussing those issues with everyone tonight. And thank you very much for paying attention and listening.
All right, first question. In light of recent nationwide events, use of force policies are under close examination across the country. What are your views on the current use of force policies in place at BSO, and what changes, if any, would you propose? And we'll start with you, Mr. Clark, and then come to Sheriff Toney.
Sure. Fortunately, Robert, we've had a use of force policy at Broward Sheriff's Office for many years that already outlaws or makes it inappropriate to use the tactics that were used in other cities, such as Minneapolis. There was a lack of training is what caused the issue at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. When Greg Toney came, he went from 0 to 100. He implemented MMA style training. We don't need that. If anyone watched Channel 7, the takedown just 2 weeks ago, you'll see Gregory Toney's training in place. That's what he taught the deputies. There were many deputies injured and had brain bleeds due to his inefficient, ineffective training. We can't have that. We need de-escalation. We need to put policy into place to be able to try to de-organize the situation, to minimize the situation, to try to bring someone in that's in that situation without causing harm to them or our deputies.
Okay. Sheriff Toney.
Yeah, thank you. Let me tell you about the tremendous reform efforts we've instituted since my administration has been leading this organization. To begin with, Mr. Clark is incorrect. He's never served in the capacity of law enforcement. He doesn't understand use of force policies, nor has he ever been engaged with somebody who's trying to take their life. But the importance of what we have done in this organization didn't come as a byproduct of Minneapolis. When I stepped into this organization, a cultural element of change needed to take place because there was a great deal of tolerance when it comes to excessive force. So the first thing we did was to introduce an early warning system, a system that now tracks all the use of force that occurs and gives us an opportunity to look and examine that deputy's behaviors. Is it a first time, second time, third time? Is this person subject to creating some type of harm? Do we put them in remedial training, et cetera? We put that in place. That ensures that we don't allow what happened in Minneapolis, the 16th time, to end up where somebody's hurt, harmed, or killed. We've also had to reestablish our Professional Standards Committee, a committee comprised of both civilian and law enforcement officers who provide a recommendation for disciplinary action to the chair, to myself. And the Professional Standards Committee that had been around really had a deplorable culture of accepting this type of behavior, creating what we call the blue wall in law enforcement. Protect the law enforcement officers at all costs, regardless of what occurs. A new Professional Standards Committee has been in place, selecting men and women that was competent. We brought in civilians who have served as attorneys, labor management experts, and I hired Julio Gonzalez, a former judge, to be the chairman of that committee. But we didn't stop there. The FBI created, in 2019, created a use of force database where they now assess, review, analyze use of force cases for organizations. Here in Broward County, I signed up our agency. Now we report all our incidents to the use of force review database from the FBI to bring more transparency. But another step that we have taken just recently is to launch a social justice task force so that we're not taking on these responsibilities and challenges on our own, but to include the community in the discussion and help us develop policies. I also pushed Mayor Honas to create the first civilian review board at the county level so that every law enforcement office agency here in Broward County beyond BSO now has a second set of eyes to examine, review, and recognize any deficiencies that exist. And I'll close with this. We've also invested $1 million into racial equity and implicit bias training, an important tool that was offered up under previous administrations but yet ignored. And now we've partnered up with every law enforcement administrator in this county to make sure all our law enforcement officers receive this cultural awareness and sensitivity training, which has been lacking for a long time.
Thank you. This next question is going to start with you, Sheriff Tony. The economic challenges presented by COVID will unquestionably impact upcoming BSO budgets. As you work with the county commission and contracted cities on securing funds, what will be your priorities and why?
Well, Robert, your question is very timely. Today we finished up and it was approved our budget, and we came in with an increase of roughly 2% this year, having negotiated that down with the county, as our original request was about 5.5%. But to your point, COVID-19 has hit the entire economic community, and the revenue streams are not what it was. So we had to pivot. But core things that we had already launched will be able to continue, such as launching the Department of Preparedness and Response. We've enhanced our TAC teams and operating teams out in the community. We invested monies last year at our neighborhood support team to get out and engage in the community and help out on issues like COVID-19, where we delivered millions of pounds of food across the county. We've partnered up with private organizations like Feeding South Florida to continue that type of program going. But we can't forget also the aspect that, look, we're a public safety organization. We've spent roughly $7 million last year into our real-time crime center, partnered up with Motorola, Safer Watch, so that we can track and monitor over 10,000 cameras across 256 schools. We've now extended that into our houses of worship, and we're extending it into our businesses. So our public safety responsibilities won't change, but we just have to be much more, physically responsible, understanding that we don't have the 5% that was requested, but the county was gracious enough to give us 2%. We'll be able to get the job done.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Robert. What Sheriff Tony forgot to tell you there, conveniently, is that BSO just lost 30% of funding for the port. We have never been less safe in Broward County. In fact, just today, we broke a record for murders in Broward County due to the way Broward Sheriff's Office is currently being run. What Tony also didn't tell you is that we're on the verge of losing Cooper City as a contract city. We're on the verge of losing Parkland as a contract city. The contracts at BSO are going away due to his inability to negotiate. That's what I bring to the table. As someone who has military experience, business experience, and legal experience, I know how to negotiate those contracts. I know how to deal with the cities, with municipalities. I know how to build bridges and build relationships. That's not happening. In fact, the Cooper City contract has been in negotiations for over a year. BSO is getting ready to lose that to Davie, just like they lost Southwest Ranches. And if you live in the county, and you understand the way BSO operates, the minute we start losing those contracts, all the citizens become less safe.
Next question will start with you, Mr. Clark. Broward County Regional Dispatch has been an ongoing concern with regard to response times, labor shortages, closest unit response, and other concerns. While improvement has been made, do you believe regional dispatch service is at the level it needs to be? Why or why not?
It's absolutely not at the level that it needs to be. In fact, it hasn't increased and it hasn't gotten better under the current administration. I've spoken to 3 people in the last 2 weeks that have tried to call 911 and been unable to get through. No one picked up the phone. Imagine that you're in the middle of a life-threatening incident and you can't get through on 911. That's because the agency is being run in an inefficient manner. There's nothing changed with communications. There's nothing changed with emergency response. It has been a problem since the Fort Lauderdale airport situation, and it continues to be a problem today. It's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when we have a catastrophe and that system fails completely, just like it did at the airport and just like it did at MSD. We need somebody at the agency that's going to come in and fix those things. We need regionalization. We need to deal with the tech companies. It's 2020. There's zero reason why, with a $1 billion budget, we don't have a state-of-the-art communication systems. Right now, it's being controlled by the county commission. Why hasn't the sheriff taken that and taken back control? At one time, communications was controlled by the sheriff's office. It was pawned off to the county commission. It's time to take it back, and it's time to bring us into 2020 technology and not something from the 1980s.
Sheriff Tony.
Yeah, listen, let me just say this to our viewers. We're several minutes in on this forum and debate, and there's been nothing but fear-mongering produced by Mr. Clark with no facts, no data-driven, and this community needs to recognize this. The same nonsense that's being discussed and spoiled out into this community for sake of fear was done for several months. But I'm going to stay on task and talk about the regional communication system. Since accepting command of this office, one of the core things that the MSD Commission report was looking to see established was a relationship between the sheriff and the county administrator who runs communications. It falls under her purview and her authority to ensure we put the necessary checks and balances in place, beginning with the operating protocols and then also the technology, because those are the two differences. BSO is responsible for the operational aspect because it is my dispatchers and communication specialists in there. The technology is procured and managed by the administrator, the county administration. And there has been conflict for sake of egos, quite frankly. But with Bertha Henry at my side, we have put forth the procurement of the necessary radio systems. That was a core item that needed to be taking place. There's been partnerships to modify our training protocols, which are already in place and we are excelling. We've also started to work and put more pressures on our local government officials in terms of cities to ensure the towers are rectified and put in place in a manner that's productive. But these things takes time. But by no stretch of the imagination are we worse than we were when I accepted command of this office. And this community should understand that there has not been the type of partnership and relationship that this agency now has with the county in decades, not a few years, but in decades. They can most certainly count on our men and women responding to calls, and that we will continue to tackle all the challenges that are needed behind procuring the necessary technology and not having battles amongst 2 different organizations, which jeopardizes the safety of roughly 2 million people here in this county.
Thank you. Many cities across the U.S. are seeing an increase in property crime and violent crime as a result of the economic turmoil being faced today. How will you work to ensure we do not see the same challenges there in Broward County? And we'll start off with you, Sheriff Tony.
Yeah, one of the core things we recognized was that there was going to be an impact related to large party gatherings and then therefore people losing jobs and crime spikes occurring. One of our districts, we had a crime spike. We had a couple of shootings, and the first thing we did was reallocate our manpower, put our specialized units out there to reduce that crime pattern, and we've been successful. But we also learned so many lessons about what we can do for technologies, invested in things like ShotSpotter to put down a better level of response protocols when it comes to our men and women getting out to scenes rapidly to reduce any type of harm or someone being killed. I think over the last few months, if you look and go back from our use of force uniform crime report data that is input into the FBI from 2017 to 2020 in our first quarter, when we talk about violent crimes, because this is also one of these fear-mongering approaches, if you look at what we had from 2017, there was 1,581 violent crimes totally inputted. And compared to where we at in 2020, we're at 1,387. So we're not on some skyrocket, the community's falling apart, which Mr. Clark would hope to induce fear. But when we have a spike in crime, understand a spike in crime for a week is not the correlation for what's occurred over an entire year. And he doesn't understand that because he has never served in this capacity. And I don't think he's capable of understanding how data entry works when it comes to crime patterns.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Greg, for making my point. There's 3 months left in the year. You're almost at that point. Listen, I said it before and I'll say it again. It's not fear-mongering. It's really simple. The best thing about any governmental agency, it's called a public records request. I hate to have the public do fact-checking, but you need to do it. Do a public records request. Let's see how far or how long it takes Tony to get back to you. He mentioned the one neighborhood. There were 7 to 8 murders in that neighborhood before he did anything. He acknowledged that on several forums back. It's not fear-mongering. Do a public records request. As I said earlier, we've already exceeded the murders all-time high in 2020 that we had of any year in the past. That's a fact. That's a stat. He can go to the crime lab. See, what Greg doesn't want the public to know is the men and women of BSO call me on a daily basis, from the deputies to the lieutenant colonels to the majors to the lieutenants. They call and they're worried. They're concerned about Broward County because they see what he's done to the agency and they see where it's headed. That is why he got 2 votes of no confidence. What we need is a leader to come in there, put politics to the side, acknowledge there's a problem. As a leader, you have to be able to admit when there's a problem. Clearly, Greg Tony doesn't want to admit there's a problem. He's ignoring the current crime situation in Broward County. Elect a leader to come in there, get politics out of the agency, and fix it. That's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Next question. Across the nation, there is significant civil tension associated with the Black Lives Matter movement and reform. Voices and messaging across the spectrum of the future of policing range from the Blue Lives Matter to defund the police. As sheriff, how will you address this? And are the movements compatible or mutually exclusive? Mr. Clark, you're first.
Look, I agree with the right to peaceful protest. I agree with the First Amendment. I agree that we've come to a time in our society where we need to have those honest adult conversations with one another. What we can't have, though, is rioting, looting, and burning down buildings. I've met with several people in Las Olas that their properties were damaged during these recent protests. A protest that burns something down and tears things apart is not a protest. That is a criminal act, okay? It's been said, Gregory Tony was asked before, if something similar to Portland or New York came to Broward County, would he allow the federal agents to come in and help protect Broward County? He said, absolutely not. I'm here to tell the public that I believe the men and women of Broward County Sheriff's Office do an excellent job and can handle the situation. But in the event we need help, of course I'm going to ask for help. But what he also didn't say was that there's interagency agreements. The federal government has the right to protect the courthouse and the post office. He doesn't want to acknowledge that because he wants to play political games with certain groups in town. You can't do that. You can't play political games when it comes to safety. And that's what's going on in Broward County. That's what's been happening for the last administration and the current administration. I'm okay with peaceful protests. I've spoken to the leaders of the local Black Lives Matter group, and we've had conversations. They're not for defunding the police, the local organization. They're not for getting rid of the nuclear family like the national organization is. They're for making sure that everyone is treated fairly and equally. And that's what I intend to do as sheriff, to make sure every community is treated fairly and equally.
Sheriff Tony.
One of the key things about the protests and how Black Lives Matter has been reinsurged, because It is not a new movement. This is an extension of the civil rights movement as a byproduct of the same fights and fears and injustices that both my grandparents and my parents had to absorb, as well as myself. And so the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a trio of words that Mr. Clark have a hard time even recognizing and announcing and partnering up with, has been included in our discussions. When we started our social justice task force, 2 of their core leadership and members stepped in to participate in this area. We also started to recognize the importance long before, again, George Floyd murder and protest, about making sure that we were an agency that was much more accountable and transparent. Last year alone, I ended up having to terminate roughly a half a dozen officers for slamming young Black kids face into the ground, for choke slamming little white girls, for beating people in handcuffs, because this culture has been tolerated here. And I had to destroy and break down this notion that it would be acceptable for law enforcement officers to come into this community, take an oath to protect and serve, and only brutalize the people in this community. When it comes to the reform aspects, what we have done to introduce cultural awareness and racial equity and implicit bias training is something that has been fundamentally requested, but it extends beyond just a training protocol or policy. The criminal justice system in itself is saturated with systemic and institutional racism. Now, my counterpart has never worked in this capacity. He's never absorbed the hardships that exist, that truly exist when it comes to Black and brown people and the encounters that they have with law enforcement. Now, my administration is comprised of roughly 500 years of institutional knowledge and experience of BSO, born and bred commanders. I didn't bring a squad of people in here. And now we have the most diverse command staff. So our conversations are different. And we're doing the things that the community expect of us, not just from an operating standpoint, but we're also including them in the discussion, including them in the policy development, including them in the training. That's a practice, that's a model, not just for the state of Florida, but for the entire country.
Thank you, Sheriff Tony. We're going to do closing remarks. We're going to start with Mr. Clark. We'll start with you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you to everyone that's listening in. Listen, we're not in one of those times to where we can just sit by the sidelines and watch and hope and hope things get better. The morale at Broward Sheriff's Office is at an all-time low. You've had 2 no votes, no confidence votes. Sorry, I'm in the middle. There's a number of people walking in front of me. You've had 2 votes of no confidence. Okay, the men and women of Broward Sheriff's Office have spoken. They have said that they do not trust Gregory Tony. They know about his background. They know about what's going on with the FBI investigation. They know what's going on with the FDLE investigation. Gregory Tony talks about having the most diverse command staff. Gregory Tony didn't promote anyone. All he did was elevate those individuals that were already there from a prior administration. In fact, he talks about his undersheriff. His undersheriff position, he actually brought someone in from an outside agency that was an undersheriff, understood what was going on with the bleed kids, and the guy ran and left. So what happened? Gregory Tony had a meeting at the round table, and he's going to know what that is. He had a meeting, and in that meeting, he passed it around. Nobody wanted the job. The only one that stood up was Nicole Anderson. She stood up and accepted the job. What's going on at Broward Sheriff's Office is a fact. We are less safe today than we've ever been in Broward County. And I ask the men and women, don't trust me. Don't take my word for it. Go do your homework. Do a public records request, because we are now our safety is gone. And Gregory Tony is solely responsible for that. He will not take responsibility. He will not admit what's going on and the mistakes that he's made. I am here to bring change. I'm here to bring positivity and get away from all of these politics. I'm here to run the agency the way it should be run. It's a public service, public safety agency. It is not a police department. If you live in Broward County, it touches the airport, the seaport, which we lost 30% of this week. It touches the Department of Detention, which are the jails, communications, law enforcement, fire, EMS, mental health, and community service programs. What's going on is we're running it. We have a sergeant running the sheriff's office into the ground. And it's time for Broward County to wake up. If you don't wake up, we're going to lose Broward County forever. We're going to lose the Broward County Sheriff's Office forever, because we're going to lose these contracts. And you notice Gregory Tony didn't talk about those contracts because he knows it's true that they're in negotiations and they're stalled because of ineffective leadership. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, everyone. Please do your homework. do the public records request. Prove that I'm wrong or I'm right, but I can tell you, when you do it, you're going to find out that statistics are not on the side of Gregory Tony. Thank you.
Closing remarks from Sheriff Tony.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for the time and give me an opportunity to speak on some truths that occur in this agency. You know, I don't have time to rebuttal just a bunch of lies and fear mongering. This organization is currently being managed like no other, and it's not because of me. I've had enough courage to make the right decisions and put the necessary people in place to lead this organization. This slander effect about the undersheriff and all these things, these men and women have served this community, wore this uniform, put their lives on the line, and sacrificed a great deal. And for anyone, any candidate, to try to marginalize their performance and what they deserve, it's absurd and it's offensive. This organization has done the things that is necessary for public safety. We've reallocated $1 million to make sure that our schools would never again see the likes of what occurred in Parkland by building a real-time crime center. We brought forth the best training that's offered through the FBI, Homeland Security, and many other federal entities. We've reinvested $1 million into tactical medical equipment. We gave the men and women the best raise they received. We've had more promotions internally, which is fundamentally the right thing to do, but also is building our progress. I've had roughly 400 promotions since I've been in this office. Half of them, roughly 200 of them have been women. We've never seen that type of fair and equitable promotionary process. It's not a matter of just elevating people into positions, but it's promoting them into positions in which they're competent and which they deserve, not sprinkling them across and giving them marginal promotions of sergeants, but not allowing them to get in leadership positions. We've also started to build things such as our neighborhood support team launched last year to build a closer and tighter relationship with the community and not use our outreach program as a political tool to gather votes. We also looked at what can we do going forward, advancing and building the agency's first Department of Preparedness and Response. We've never seen a new department developed or brought in this agency since 2003 when Fire Rescue joined this organization. My closing comment is quite simple. We are on the path of progress. By no stretch of imagination can this county, nor this organization, can afford to have someone step in a leadership role who have no understanding about what it is to serve in a law enforcement or public safety capacity and lead 5,700 dedicated public safety personnel who have been here for quite some time. We can't afford to roll the dice and hope that it works. This community has an opportunity to look at what we are doing right now and as to whether or not that is important enough for us to move this community forward. This office spans across 1,300 square miles and touch every single city, whether it's contract with our organization or not. And the men and women of this organization are doing an exceptional job. Not average, they're doing an exceptional job during a time in this country where there is a cry for police reform and justice, and we have not lost the public trust because we're doing the things that they expect. And if the community wants to continue to see that, then I would ask for their vote, not for myself, but for this county and for the men and women of this agency so that we can stay on task. We can't afford to go back to broken politics and allow someone to step in this organization who has their own self-interest and would use fear to manipulate people's votes. And so I hope I have your votes coming up in November. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. I want to thank both of you, Mr. Clark and Sheriff Tony, for being here with us today. This has been Meet the Candidates from Broward County, and we are happy to have both candidates here to speak with us today. This has been a program of the Miramar Pembroke Pines Regional Chamber of Commerce, the Weston Florida Chamber of Commerce, the Pembroke Park West Park Chamber of Commerce, and the Business Partnership of Davie Cooper City, and the South Florida Business Partnership Legislative Action Committee. Again, thank you, gentlemen, and good luck. Remember to vote on November 3rd. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll start the Broward County Supervisor of Elections discussion in about 5 minutes.